We're on. Yes. Thanks so much. Computer land. It's that start button that does it all the time. Fucking start button. So here we go. I'm too old for this. I miss. So how amazing, how amazing, how amazing. In the sacred place, the Potala, the mountain Pure Land, abides the Sambhogakaya master, the Bodhisattva Chesarig, the great compassion. Think of me, your child, who prays to you with compassion, and grant me your blessings and sublime empowerment. My awareness, naturally clear, without covering of veils. Lord, isn't this your wisdom awareness? This manifestation of my awareness, the spontaneous wisdom of love and sublime knowledge. Chesarig, Lord of compassion, isn't this you? I've never been apart from this, even for an instant. Never apart, yet I was unaware of it. And now that I recognize it, the Bodhisattva, the great compassion, vanishes. The Potala mountain, Pure Land, disappears. Unobstructed within this unborn space of the nature of awareness, I exalt within this awareness, the play of spacious exaltation. And when all radiance has the nature of Sambhogakaya, clinging to Pure Lands is misleading. The label is sacred Dharma, the narrow path of attachment. There is no Bodhisattva, great compassion, outside of me. I look within. I've discovered the Sambhogakaya within my own self. How exhilarating, how amazing, how fantastic. This is never-ending happiness. This is the kindness of my holy Lama, and the blessing of the Lama's profound instructions. I sing this joyous, exalted song and dance upon reaching the summit of my aspirations. How amazing, in the sacred place of the glorious colored mountains palace, abides the Nirmanakaya master, the lotus-born Pramodayana Guru Rinpoche. Think of me, your child, who prays to you with compassion, and grant me your blessings and sublime empowerment. My own awareness, unceasing self-liberation. Lord, isn't this your wisdom awareness? My mind's nature, sources of the kayas and the wisdoms. Lotus-born, isn't this you? I've never been apart from this, even for an instant. Never apart, yet I was completely unaware of it. Now that I recognize it, the lotus-born vanishes. The copper-colored mountain disappears, unobstructed within the unborn space of the nature of awareness. I exalt within awareness, the play of empty spaciousness. Where any appearance of the energy of awareness is Nirmanakaya's manifestation. When any appearance of the energy of awareness is Nirmanakaya's manifestation, clinging to Pure Lands is misleading. The label Bodhisattva, the narrow path of attachment. There is no lotus-born outside of me. I look within. I have discovered the Nirmanakaya within my own self. How exhilarating, how amazing. This is never-ending happiness. This is the kindness of my holy Lama, and the blessings of the Lama's profound instructions. I sing this joyous, exalted song and dance upon reaching the summit of my aspirations. How amazing. In the sacred place, the energy center of the great exaltation at the crown of my head, abides the peerless Lord Protector, my root Lama. Think of me, your child, who prays to you with compassion, and grant me your blessings and the sublime empowerment. My present awareness, the fourth aspect, beyond the three times, timeless awareness. My present awareness, the fourth aspect, beyond the three times. Lord, isn't this your wisdom mine? My awareness, the foundation of all phenomena. Root Lama, isn't this you? I've never been apart from this, even for an instant. Never apart, yet I was unaware of it. Now that I recognize it, my root Lama vanishes. The designated pure lands disappear. Unobstructed with the unborn space of the nature of awareness, I exalt within this spaciousness awareness, the play of empty exaltation, openness. When all experience arises as the Lama's nature, when all experience arises as the Lama's nature, the Guru's nature, clinging to Pure Lands is misleading. The label Rupakaya, the narrow path of attachment. There is no Lama outside of me. I look within. I've discovered enlightenment within myself. How amazing, how unbelievable, how exhilarating. This is never-ending happiness. This is the kindness of my holy Lama and the blessing of the Lama's profound instructions. I sing this joyous, exalted song and dance upon reaching the summit of my aspirations. One or two more. How amazing! In this sacred place, the pure celestial land, abides the chief of all the Dakinis, Vajravahari. Think of me, your child, who prays to you with compassion, and grant me your blessings, and remove the obstacles and obscurations. My original, basic nature, the vast, uncontrived expanse. Companion, isn't this your stainless space? This wisdom of empty exaltation without coming together or separating. Wisdom Dakini, isn't this you? I have never been apart from this, even for an instant. Never apart, yet I was so unaware of it. Now that I recognize it, now that I experience it, Vajravahari vanishes. The celestial pure lands disappear. Unobstructed within the unborn space of the nature of awareness, I exult in awareness, the play of empty exaltation. And so, when appearances and sounds and incisive knowledge have the female Buddha's nature, clinging to pure lands is misleading. And the label, Sublime Mother, the narrow path of attachment. There is no Dakini outside me. I look within. And I have discovered the Mother, the victorious ones within myself. How exhilarating, how amazing. This is never-ending happiness. This is the kindness of the Holy Lama and the blessing of the Lama's profound instructions. I sing this joyous, exalted song and I dance upon reaching the summit of my aspirations. There's some others, but we'll let them go for right now. We'll just focus in for a little while. I always consider Winnicott a bodhisattva, a person who came into this world for liberation. And his use of the word transitional awareness transitional space simultaneously, and is understanding that the core of the self is awareness itself. Because up to this point, in psychoanalysis, the self was the representational. The self was how we represented ourselves to ourselves, right? Internal representations and internal objects and all that stuff. So this is a massive shift when he began to bring forth that the self, which is awareness, is not our mind. And this way you can see the relationship between him and Dzogchen very directly. That primordial awareness, manifesting our own subjectivity, our own awareness, with depth and breadth, is, so it helps manifest the mind. There's a difference between my mind and this awareness. And then this started having vast implications for psychotherapy, and gave a wide range to psychotherapy that actually opened up, not unlike Jung, from Jung's side, was opening up awareness itself. And that he would point out that many times we could be located in our mind, and if we're located in our mind, then we don't quite experience the self as knower, as the experiencer, as awareness itself, the non-conceptual, pre-reflective dimension that is always in oneness. And he saw this very important around, in quotes, pathology, just not only normality but pathology, and would see that people who were suffering a lot of times from being locked in their mind alone, or in internalizations alone, history alone, locked in it. And as long as they tried to change from that dimension, some things could happen, but the liberation could not take place. That they had to have one more step where they began. Not unlike Panjali speaks about suspending the mind and becoming, as we suspend the mind, we become aware of awareness. The rittis stop, and then the self arises. In transitional space, we step out of the mind, we suspend it, leave it, however it is, aesthetically. Listening to the chant, ah, does that, so many ways. And we feel ourselves into this awareness. And then the self begins to arise, the base. He was always aware of the insecurity of subjectivity, because at different levels of subjectivity, as we enter into it, it can first open. As we leave the security of thought, as we leave the security of hateful feelings, as we leave the security of stories, endless, redundant stories, we leave that story, which is actually security. No matter how terrible it is, something is better than nothing, a la Winnicott. And so we start giving up that story, and then there's this opening, that first of all feels like a void, an abyss, falling. He's described falling, falling, falling. And some does depend on our own history, developmental history, how we were held and how things took place in those circumstances, as Peter was describing it. So initially what will feel like home is not home at all. It's an abyss. Falling, falling, falling. And then slowly but surely, if it can be held. So transitional space, and the learning to experience transitional space, which is the place of awareness, and how to be held, and how to use the use of the object, how to use objects, and how to use phenomena, and to use situations that actually hold us as we disintegrate to reintegrate. Disintegrating means the false self, the self that's been there a long, long time, begins to fall apart. And then this terror. And then, but if we can hold it, and it can be held through whatever way that means, then the base begins to have the felt sense of the base begins to arise. And we start having an ongoing felt sense of continuity of being. And as I'm describing this, you can hear it also described also in Dzogchen. This language can either be translated from a contemporary psychoanalytic point of view of his, or you're actually hearing the mystery traditions, huh? Like ongoing continuative being, Vajrakumara. Huh? And then this ongoing continuity of beingness begins to grow, and then it is both within inside him and also outside of him. Huh? And he wasn't reading Dzogchen texts. He trusted his own experience completely. It would arise out of his own experience and his own observations. So we'll just sit with that for a few moments. He also had the understanding, too, that the archetypical dimension would arise out of the transitional space. And if you're experiencing these archetypes and you're not in transitional space, they become one more story on belief. And it's another cognition that can give us hope, but it doesn't give us liberation. Anytime there's hope, there'll be despair. You follow what I mean by that? So and then the archetypes begin to arise, and and his connection to the archetypical, as Peter was describing it, is very fleshy, very personal. And so the archetypes are simply not way out there, but actually embodied in experiences, embodied in places, embodied in persons, embodied in in art. But there's an embodiedness that really relates out of resonance to the lived body, the live body. And also some of his work, again, some of these people who are very connected to that, like Merleau-Ponty, also, as he goes into it, what is embodiment and how to be embodied, which is not necessarily a beautiful body or even a strong body, but the body of awareness, the embodiment of awareness. You can be really very strong and yet not be embodied. You'll be in a machine body, you with me? Which is not the body of aliveness. And then also the subtle body is also the body of energy and resonance, and like actually what the yogis call the subtle body. Literally, Winnicott also worked with subtle energy, and that helped embodiment. There's a book called On Not Being Able to Write by Mary Miller, who was a great author, psychoanalyst herself, and went through a very, very terrible psychotic experiences. And she would describe Winnicott sitting with her and holding her hand and then feeling all this energy coming into her, and then she would regain the sense of aliveness. Huh? One of Winnicott's preoccupations was aliveness or deadness. Huh? And to be an alive person is about as good as it gets. And, and that human beings are always struggling with aliveness or deadness. Huh? And how to find aliveness in every situation, and how to find aliveness within our experience, no matter what it is, or even how limited we are. This all making sense? And so he's a radical existentialist in certain ways. He understands that it's really an existential developmental story. You take development very seriously, but it's you're always reframing things, reframing it, languaging it where it's existential, because that's where the challenge is, and that's where we can come into being again as we go through that. Almost done. And we can see how meditation fits into this frame of reference. Meditation can fit into 1,001 frames, like anything. But how this actually frame holds meditation and the transformativeness of it, the transformation of it. He was preoccupied with spaciousness, and the spaciousness of experience provides the base that is not simply cognitive or representational. And sometimes you get too locked into cognition or the representational world, you will not have the base of experience itself. So this base is ultimately pre-reflective, non-conceptual knowingness, a felt sense. he often felt too that the imagination itself arose out of spaciousness. It arose out of transitional space. That he considered a lot of fantasy dissociative experience. I know I'm babbling a little bit, but he considered a lot of fantasy dissociative experience. And that many people spend so much of their time in phantasmagoria. And ultimately, in doing that, they became dissociated out of the body. You with me? A lot of fantasy would be dissociative. But to have the creative imagination arises almost the same organ that is fantasy and dissociative, leading nowhere, becomes in transitional space, in the awareness state, becomes the organ of perception and the organ of creativeness and inventiveness. And that the organ of imagination, again, not unlike Merleau-Ponty, allows you to see what might be in situations, allows you to experience the subtle dimension in human beings. It is actually a way of perceiving actuality. There's always the question, did Winnicott invent this or discover this? Because he considered invention and discovery almost the same phenomena. Not arbitrary invention, but it's like creativity and discovery are the same thing. That polarity is completely close. And so a lot of our growth, is being a creative person. And to be a creativity in our life, whatever that is to be alive. So for him, creativity was like the optimal state of health, if you will. Okay, and this relational creativity, okay? He also, the yogis speak about Vajra, the Vajra holders, the holders of the light. And he considered that awareness itself, a transitional, be able to become a master of transitional space, to know when you're in it and know when you're not in transitional space, is essential to be a healer. Because if you're in your mind alone, you can do certain things and be of use, right? But actually, transformation does not take place in mind alone. But entering into the transitional and having that access, in whatever language you're using and whatever modalities you're using, that is where healing naturally takes place. That is where the healing realm is entering and being in the transitional, which he also called the intermediate area. Intermediate area means in between. In between what? In between fantasy and in between reality. In between thinking and feeling. In between everything. So if I'm in between, and I have the path of in between, then I can utilize thought in service of that. I can use my affects in service of that. I can use my thinking in service of that. There's freedom. Liberation is in the transitional space, though it is not easy to enter it, and we have to get used to it and learn how to hold it. The transitional object was very important for him, just like later it's the self-object function, that a lot of this stuff is a two-person deal. And learning how to use others and to use situation and to use events, to use enemies, to use whatever, allows us to transform from being in one state into another state of liberation. He actually spoke a lot about formlessness. So transitional space, when we're in it, and is not an altered state. It's not an altered state of mind. It is not an altered state of mind. It is not hypnosis. It is and to be in the transitional space allows us to feel formlessness. And first we have to learn how to tolerate formlessness. That means really dropping a lot of our obsessive compulsive strategies. And resting and learning how to rest, he considered a big, big deal. If you can rest in formlessness. So this formlessness experience allows for the eventual assimilation and the metabolization of experience. If you can rest in formlessness, you can in time metabolize everything and anything. In many events, it's not so easy to think them or hold them in the mind. So many events, either because they happened so early in our life, or they were just too much, were saturated. Some things are just so saturating, huh? And when things are so saturating, when the intensity is so saturating, then metabolization starts really getting stuck, huh? You can't metabolize it anymore. The mind just freezes. It just goes into a freeze. So again, to find that place of formlessness, to enter formlessness, and be prepared to enter formlessness, allows the metabolism state, the metabolism process to begin again, to metabolize everything and anything, that it becomes much more energy and aliveness itself. So when things are saturating, they cannot be thought, but they can be intuited. The formless state is where intuition takes place, or our language, where direct perception takes place. Or use the word simply felt. I can have a felt sense of it. I can't quite think of it. I don't know the words of it, but I stay in the felt sense, and slowly but surely the felt sense begins to take form and becomes more reflective knowledge. So language becomes more possible or invented. So formlessness, he actually speaks this way. When you and I are in formlessness, it's a kind of timeless state. And this timelessness itself can re-begin to hold time again. And timeless appears through the doorway of the transitional moment. And many times people have all kind of problems around time and dissociated states of time and remembering time. I don't mean remember what hour it is, but time itself seems to appear and disappear, and we lose whole gamuts of experience in time-dissociated states. So sometimes a person has not experienced the relaxation of unintegration. Like you always have to be on. The relaxation of an integration in their early life, and later will refine or rediscover the experience in a non-purposeful state, non-purposeful existing, resting and relating through unintegrated states, and being held at times in unintegrated states. Formless place of being that is rejuvenating, brings forth that youthful experience again, both in depth and breadth of experience. Being in formless states of experiencing can be useful in passing through and assimilating what do we call the unbearable existential agonies, like death, loss, torture. And that for trauma from his point of view, and all human beings have a cumulative or acute trauma, the capacity to enter these formless states of being, objectless states, helps metabolize the experience. Say yes if you're understanding this. And you can see how some of this is coming back again in more contemporary trauma views, okay? We'd also call this unformulated experience, or formless experiencing, unformulated experiencing. Transitional space opens that up. As we go through that, we start feeling potential space. So it begins to shift. The formlessness starts, and you also will feel this in meditation, right? It can be formless, and then you start finding yourself in the field of potentiality, huh? Which actually, I think is the Dharmakaya arising. You know, none of this stuff is far off. It's all human experience. You start experiencing vast potential. And even the movement to action, huh? That's why there's movement and stillness. There's a movement towards action arising again from being frozen, stuck, to the movement of action. So some of this has to do with experiencing objectless states of experience, and nonetheless in the therapy world or also in meditation world, feeling some sort of connection. Whether in spirituality it's companions, pets, it's all the same. Someone holding it with you, teacher, therapist, but helping hold people having formless states. To do that, you and I have to have that capacity, because it takes one to know one, and if that capacity is not ours, then it's like the mothering function is an obsessional compulsive state for you. You follow what I mean? And that, or a fantasy state. It's just fantasy. It's an hysterical dream. It's not quite the same of being held by a person in formless awareness. Say yes if that's making sense. So we can hold that again in our bodies. This formless state is also considered at times a state of resting and play. Oh, two more things about the body first, sorry. Within the formless state, there's a manifestation of the quality of spaciousness or openness. But this transitional space itself becomes a medium. So it's the medium of awareness, the medium which I'm moving through in my life. This is my medium. It's like the sea, this field, this ocean, this medium is what I'm moving through in my life. And this medium actually holds the mind-body communication. So often, and he was very much in terms of psychosomatic illnesses, so often when we have psychosomatic illnesses, that doesn't simply mean our mind causes illness, but that illness itself, pain, can cause splitting between our mind and body. So we can be stuck in the mind and hypermentalistic, or we can be stuck in the body, alexithemic, one of his favorite words also. For psychosomatic, am I going too fast? Is this you guys following this? So for psychosomatic issues, he would say often, people who are experiencing psychosomatic phenomena, locked into pain in certain ways, or they can be locked in. We can be locked in our body, and there's no mind. So if I'm simply locked in my body, I'm a very concrete body person, and I can get some experience from the body, I can get a sensation, but I can't metaphorize anything. I can't go beyond the gross sensation, and I can't put it to metaphors. I can't, because my mind, my language isn't there. My mind is off that way. So unless there's some union between my mind and body, which transitional space is that which makes the connection, I don't have language to articulate my bodily felt experiences, that it does become words and it can be processed and metabolized. So a lot of times when people suffer from psychosomatic problems, they are alexithemic. And not only that, but you ask them what they feel and they have trouble having language. They can be brilliant. They can be the most fantastic, brilliant attorney you've ever met in your life. But any personal reference, any bodily felt reference, any who-ness. He was talking about Dudjom Rinpoche living in the world of who-ness. All is personal, animistic. You with me? That is a privilege. To be in the world of who-ness is a fantastic privilege that a lot of times we don't enter into. When we're alexithemic, it's hard to feel who-ness too. We're concretized, locked in sensation. But if we can begin to experience the transformative of potential space arising for us, then, which actually begins with the imagination. And sometimes to be able to imagine something where it wasn't, that is a creative act. I remember one time working with very disturbed kids who were very locked into their bodies and not much. So we'd spend hours in front of refrigerators, opening up the refrigerator. There's a cookie. Close the cookie, okay, or candy stuff. And then we start imagining the cookie and the candy. You with me? And trying to have imaginary experience of the cookie or the candy. Quite a step into transitional space. You follow what I mean by that? Say yes if you do. So the attempt to try, when people, very much Winnicottian, would use writing strokes, paintings, just drawing doodles, some kind of way of expression to open up the transitional space. So when I'm in transitional space, then my mind and body can begin to enter oneness. Or the other side of that, I know I'm going for a long time, I can locate it in my mind alone, which is dissociated. So a lot of mind, Winnicott would look at as a dissociated state, a lot of mind activity and trying to do everything with my mind alone. I'm going to do it with my mind alone is a somewhat useless, frustrating, and disembodied experience. And again, from that side, to first enter the transitional and then embody that. Almost done. So fundamental anxiety, which was his primary interest, ontological anxiety, the anxiety of being or not being. You can also see why suicide is so close for people, right? And that it's and the unbearableness of ontological anxiety, death itself, of which we're terrified of. The most primary anxiety is death, but death is also a way out. So understanding a lot of that from that way also. So, but it can be, we're going to shift to one more thing now. Disintegration leads to integration. Disintegrative states are natural and happen naturally through life as different developmental phases impact us. So we really want to embrace disintegration as a natural prelude to growth. Or as he would say, emptiness is the capacity to fill up. When you're feeling emptiness, and definitely there's an emptiness that is not potential space, the emptiness of the void, nihilistic, that emptiness, that hunger that arises, that craving that arises, that terrible emptiness of being not a being. And by holding that emptiness, that is a sign that you're ready to begin to fill up. Because something had to happen for that emptiness to appear, some loss. So he considered loss. And going back to Peter's thing, that the loss, the first separation, is the beginning of his entire therapeutic mastery, the transitional space. The loss that he felt, and the aloneness that he felt, the locked-inness, is repeated as an ontological phenomena over and over again to come into some degree of oneness. And so unintegration or disintegration means you're frozen. You ever been frozen? Been stuck, as they say? Stuck. And that stuckness can be both plentiful, stuck out of plentifulness, but stuckness, it starts to fall apart. It starts to disintegrate. And when it starts to disintegrate around us, we start to disintegrate. And he would also say that the pathologization of disintegration is a tremendous disservice to human beings. It actually fucks them up more, to use good language. And so to feel the disintegration as a necessary moment to reformulate ourselves and regain the creative function to be alive. And he would say the false self is often a frozen self and a highly contained self. So many times people come for therapy to get rid of the false self. You with me? And it's a lack of sense of beingness, being in the field of being, or even being real. And as these events unfold both internally and externally, the lack of integration becomes less frozen. And so the lack of integration starts to defreeze. And we start to feel another panic arising, right? Of all this falling apart, falling, huh? Do you ever feel that? Falling, it's very powerful, very real. And you read the life of great masters, they all have it. They all have it. They have states of falling apart. You with me? They don't really fit the ideal, illusionary ideal, what masters are. Takini's laugh. So, as they fall apart, as we fall apart, it's all the same, that falling apart. And he says you fall and fall till you come to the place where you were based authentically the last time. When you began to lose authenticity, you fall to that place. And then at that place, you then begin the possibility of reintegrating. Huh? And of course, it's good to have otherness there, self-objects there who hold us, whatever that might be. It could be a pet, it could be a book, it could be nature, it could be whatever your aesthetic is, whatever that is, that helps hold us, that environment, and then we can continue moving ahead. That's what I always considered the the classical analyst is introgenic, actually a formulation of the bad mother, who says nothing, no response, afraid, unknown, uninhabited, as introgenic. Ultimately withholding. And recreating the very drama there. So he was not always popular at Tavistock, okay? And I knew some people from Tavistock, and they would make fun of him a lot. And because he was a radical healer, he was a radical person. And let me just continue on just a little bit more. So this formless is potential space manifesting in us, and primary unintegration becomes the resting state of formlessness. And if you solve it too soon, you're fucked. He wouldn't use those words. But if you solve the disintegrating moment too soon, the process has not actually been taking place. That there's time for this, it takes time for this whole process to be reintegrated, that you come forward with a more powerful base of awareness. Ultimately, healing is coming forward with a more powerful base of awareness to be in the world. So in becoming aware of awareness, which is spacious as you experience the formless field, and at times this can happen alone, and it can also happen when you're alone in the company of others. He also considered the archetypical realm, personified like through art, sound, music, as also transitional objects in transitional space. Because humanness does come through it. He did not think they were things, and not things at all, but humanness comes through art. Okay, almost done here. So the sense of formlessness is the beingness of being which does manifest within forms of experience, then disintegrates and reintegrates, and greater levels of coherence exist. So maybe this is enough for right now. He also made a big difference between fusion states, and transitional states. Who knows what the difference between fusion is? A lot of times we confuse fusion with transitional space. Who knows that? Merging, yeah, merging. There's a certain kind of merging, there's fusion states. You with me? that I have no identity. You with me? Now sometimes I have to merge and go through a fusion experience. And if I can go through a fusion experience, but the person who I'm fusion with or the event knows that this is a temporary thing, that fusion allows me to experience what? What does fusion allow us to experience? A sense of the self in the other. You do know that, right? Fusion allows us to experience a sense of the self in the other. Now, we might not be experiencing the sense of the self in our own self, but you get a taste of it. And then, through that fusion, and the sense of the self actually opens up for us transitional space.
Is this also a point of clarity about the difference between empathy and compassion?
Yep, very much so. From this frame, he would not use the word empathy much. He actually, Winnicott, surprisingly, you don't see that word, because he was a Kleinian. He was a Kleinian first, and Melanie Klein was, I believe, his therapist at one time. Okay, and for some reason, he thought no one grew up around Melanie Klein. He was grew up. They didn't grow up around her. And he also felt a lot of people were having stomach cancer too, as an aside, okay, and other clients too, because they were trying to process all the person's experience with their own body. You can process some experience of people you're with through your own body, especially if you're in good shape and you have a lot of space. If you're only in interpersonal mode and you're trying to empathize with everybody's suffering, you're going to have two suffering people after a while, you and them, unless you have a lot of space. Yes, please. Yes. That's a better way of saying it. That's really great. In the fusion that does take place for growth, you with me? That fusion is useful, is helpful. You also see this in spirituality. You with me? People fuse with the guru, the leader. You with me? And that fusion up to a point is really, really useful. You with me? Up to a point. And if you think that's the only thing that's going to be there in a fused state, then paradoxically, you start entering into a false self phenomena, and your own authenticity doesn't come. So a lot depends on leadership in this story, as therapists or whatever your shtick is. At times people will fuse with you, especially if you have awareness. They will fuse with you, and in that fusion, there is the light of awareness starts to open, or transitional space starts to open. Huh? And within that, the person can begin from a fused object becomes a transitional object. That's why in much of Winnicott's work, he would join people very completely in what they were doing. You with me? Language-wise, kids would say, no, no. He would mirror very directly, concrete operationally. You with me? And that way, he would be fused, there'd be a fusion with the kid or the adult. And then from that, there is a separation that starts to take, individuation starts to take place, because then the transitional space can be held. Say yes if that's making sense for you. So, yes, please. There's different levels right now. You're in awareness right now. But I doubt if you're in formlessness. You might have some formlessness. Do you feel some formlessness? Let's just say for all of us, do you feel some formlessness right now in you? Say yes if you do. You can feel the background of formlessness, right? Let's just notice that. Because we're arranged, right? We have a range. And sometimes you go into complete formlessness. Let's drop into that a little bit if we can. Now, as I start dropping into formlessness, in this room which has a sense of familiarity, and you all, I feel comfortable doing that, so I can let go. And sometimes the analysts used to call this a regression in the service of the ego. That's very poor language. It's not useful at all. This is not a regress state. I'm entering a creative state. Then you guys get further away from me. I see you like disappearing. And I hang out with it. And what this brings to mind for me is the practice we've been doing of trying to speak from this place, right? Haven't been doing this? We're going to talk, so what do? We suspend our mind. And we then bring your awareness down. And there are no words. And we feel some movement going on. We're not really thinking of anybody else interpersonally. And then the thumb begins to be formulated there. And the unformed, formulated experience starts to become formulated. And then words arise through that focusing that reflect not only what's happening in me pre-reflectively, knowledge that I know but don't know experientially yet, but also the situation. Say yes if that makes sense to you. Say no if it doesn't. So the suspending of the mind, the epoche, entering formlessness. As you enter formlessness, feel the person sitting next to you. Just feel them on the periphery. The more you feel transitional space, you can feel direct contact with the person, because transitional space allows us to hold intimacy. When you and I don't have transitional space, it just gets a bit too much. It feels like impingement at times. Say yes if that makes sense for you. Yeah? So, if you do a lot of public work, right, or you lead groups, you really want to have the capacity of being in transitional space. And speaking from transitional space and being in the transitional. Say yes if that makes sense for you. So I'm going to pass the mic and see where people are at right now a little bit. Where are you at? Where are you at? We're going to try and talk and suspend our mind a little bit. And let's just talk this way. What you experiencing as we explore these two masters? Bye.
So this is a little unformulated formulation.
Unformulated formulation, great.
And it could be a little head heavy, but what I was struck by, Peter, was that in some ways it's almost like paradoxically Rinpoche's path sounded like a smoother path of love.
Yes.
Whereas Winnicott came to the same place through Saturn.
Yes. Yes. Can you say something about that?
I think there's something in Winnicott, especially. He also has this capacity for this love of Venus, but there's something like I think about with my own children, which struck me with the original transitional object, like the blanket or whatever the kid has, it's like this profound separation between the mother and child is also the first step towards entering into this space. It's a very strange like, in like a really dramatic way when they're that small, that it's like, that to me made a lot of sense of how all this stuff opens up. Yeah.
Let's see, wander around a little bit from the other side over here. Here's the other side. I'm going to put this in your hand, if you don't mind.
Sure. What's coming up for me is at the end. I sometimes hang out in formlessness when I need to be in concrete, and I don't know how to integrate those two well yet. Yeah.
1, 2. Yeah. Would you say that again? So it's really helpful for all of us.
Yeah, that sometimes in, let's say, board meetings, I want to hang out in not pure formlessness, but in taking in the whole, and kind of, and I need to be thinking concretely, and that's where I get tripped up.
How to integrate
how to
function.
integrate that function.
That function.
Yeah.
That's the essence of Dzogchen too, is integrating the functions. How to integrate the function. Here's a Winnicottian.
Mm-hmm.
What's happening for you today?
I'm so happy to be talking about Winnicott. It's just fun that it's, and I'm with, when you were speaking, I was really tuned into just this, how much he loved play and the capacity, our capacity to play and being with that, and how that is such an opening.
Thanks. And here's an artist.
I feel that I'm kind of going in and out of that transitional space. And what Kate said about playing, sometimes I have experiences of where I'm playing. I'm playing in the world. I'm really enjoying that, and I think that's transitional space too. It feels like it to me.
How do you take pictures? You take such beautiful pictures. How do you take pictures? You can describe that. What happens for you with photographs?
The times that I've been able to, what I call like get lost in the moment and be lost and not even, and I really am having the experience rather than worrying about what the final outcome will be. It's pretty exquisite. It hasn't happened that often, but it is pretty exquisite when that happens, when I'm just being and having that direct experience of creating and not worrying about what that final outcome is. It's actually as if the experience is way more important. It is true. The experience is way more important than the final, like an image that comes out.
Does someone else want to share something? Anybody else up there?
When we were working with the experience of formlessness, one thing that happened for me that I wanted to share was the breathless state was totally predominant, and I had to work at breathing, and I was surprised by how dramatic that was to me, stunning. But then also in that state, and so much of today, so much of your talk today, just a state of really exalted love and of, at times the nectarian stream, just like a huge river and of enormous capacity to hold a lot.
Thank you so much. Does someone else want to share anything?
So at first I wanted to share, I guess, some thoughts. But then what I became aware of is that it's where the thoughts are coming from that that I'm absorbed in now, and that I love Winnicott. I love thinking about therapy, but there's all this multi-layered integration happening right now that's beyond my capacity to think. Then from it, these different thought streams are like popping up. So this, what were those two planets? Saturn and Jupiter, and the tension between them. And then in Winnicott's chart, Venus bringing it into the world, and then integrating with Kashmir Shaivism and the bliss of Samadhi is the bliss of the world, and how that's just coming through, and fusion and maternal preoccupation, and then the healthy aspect of fusion and optimal maternal failure. And it's, it's just, I'm just like in that ocean. It's more like my brain is being bathed in it than I can think it. And that's just like, I don't know how I got here, but I want to stay here.
Is this on the Sea of Love?
Mm-hmm.
Somebody else like to share? Yeah.
This is very unformulated. I'm struck by the paradox of music, because music, especially when it's not completely associated with a thing, it's just abstract. It's like the ultimate of being in the whole field. It's being in transitional space, but it's composed of these elements that are very formulated, and with time and rhythm and harmony and melody and things that go together. And I'm struck by when I try to play guitar, and it's these very specific things that I'm doing, but I have to it becomes muscle memory. I have to not think about what I'm doing at all. And then I'm in this great transitional space with it, but I'm the vehicle for it. It's
when you were asking us to enter that lovely formlessness, and we were dropping into it, it seems quite obvious, but there's an unforming, and I think that's part of what Steve was just talking about, an unforming that occurs, where unfortunately I just emptied that and entered that and emptied it. Yeah. And you were asking us to extend or pull in or enter or something with the person next to us. I don't remember the exact term. And that happens easily enough, but it doesn't stop. There's an unforming in that, and it goes anywhere, so that there was a sense of who, but the sense of place was more and more unbounded. Remember when we were children in elementary school, maybe, and if it was a really wonderful day, one could convince the teacher to run the film backwards that we had just seen. And the sense of initially just rapt attention and joy of just having something different occur, but there was an unlinking of the causality of time. Even though it was backwards, and backwards would have its own linearity, it was a happy undoing that lasted the entire film, that did not occur when it was running forwards. And so I was brought to what Peter was saying about in the the sense of embracing aliveness, and how that was present in running the film backwards without even identifying it as that. But here now with the formlessness, there was a sense of recognizing, embracing our freedom rather than identifying with our bondage. So.
I often experience a moment just upon waking where I don't know who I am yet, and I don't have any thoughts yet, and I don't remember any dreams that I just had. It's this sort of luscious, open moment, and I've been learning to re-enter that and sustain that a lot. Used to be several years ago, I'd wake up in that moment, and then my circumstance would sort of crash into my head like a ton of bricks, and I'd say, "Oh shit." But being able to keep the space open, I find this is where creativity comes from. And looking back and seeing times when my creativity was blocked, it's almost like I have to generate these forms, or I have to be this kind of person who generates these forms. But I don't have any vision, don't have any comprehension, don't know where I'm going to pull it from. That space is where it comes from.
Beautifully described. Patricia, do you mind sharing?
I'm so buoyed up by Winnicott's essence, the fact that we fall and fall and fall until we reach the place where we left off. I absolutely love that. And the fact that things like aloneness and misfortune are the very things that we need in order to continue ascending back up. When I am connected to that truth, it's so restorative for me, and there is no place for worry or fear. It's actually the other end of the spectrum. I feel immense gratitude for every situation that's unfolding for me. And it's just, I go into oneness with all the situations, and I can trust in all the situations, and I'm grateful for all the situations that are unfolding.
I love what you're saying. I was thinking of Winnicott would constantly try and deconstruct the superego for people. Because with the superego, whenever there's disintegration, you're a bad dog.
Absolutely.
And the superego itself, you see, the most powerful about the superego was not simply its pseudo-morality, but that it would fixate disintegration into a moral failure. This happens in psychology, psychiatry, in life itself, where disintegration becomes moral failure.
And I think it particularly happens on the East Coast of the United States, in Washington, D.C. I'm not kidding. We're in the capital of the world of achievement and right and wrong. I mean, I lived in New York City, which is also a very place of ambition, but it's much more soulful there. So my sense is that when we are holding this with a client who gets so caught in worry or failure, or that they're not doing it well enough, they're not doing it right, or they've done something terrible, if we're holding this Winnicott in place, I know that comes into the space for them.
Quick question. What was Winnicott's relationship with yoga?
You know, I don't think he had any as such.
Well,
I don't think that was in his realm.
Right. Well, I really appreciated the seminar, the actual content today between Peter and you, of course, reflected what we're doing, which is the integration. And so while I love all the psychotherapeutic references, and today you brought in the yogic world, which is, of course, where I'm coming from. But so Shavasana is getting people into the transitional space. And in my particular form of yoga, we do it 10 times a class. And you're really trying to get people to experience it for themselves, with or without the words. And then the pairs of opposites is, of course, a big deal with the children. And I just have to say, before I really knew what was happening, I once found myself both a Yankee and a Red Sox fan at the same time. And I thought I was going crazy, but it's holding the opposite. Yeah, that's my concrete way, holding the opposite.
Wow, not all of us have attained that here.
It's a very spring thing to say. Well, throughout the morning, what keeps on coming up for me is Dorje Lingpa and Dudjom Rinpoche, and how, and I'd love to see the archetypal types of their charts, because Dorje Lingpa was the opposite. He had such a hard time being on the earth, and he was so powerful in the Sambhogakaya realm, and also very fierce, and had a lot of his challenges came through the Sambhogakaya as well as through the earthly life. So it was yes, exactly.
All this stuff, I have no money.
And didn't he have tons of children? I think he had tons of children, which I wonder how much relatedness there was there in terms of our talk today. And yeah. And then Dudjom Rinpoche was so on the earth and so into that. Anyway.
I'm glad you brought it up.
I wanted to finish my thought, which brings up to me the particularity and singularity of our experience on the earth, and that there is no room to compare. There is no room to see one as better, best, right, wrong. That it is so much the archetypes that we're working with and that we're walking with.
I was thinking the same thing, because even for realization, there's no one doorway. For some people, Dharmakaya, they're just there, like Shiva on the mountaintop, and it's cold. And there's the Dharmakaya. For some, it's Sambhogakaya. There's the archetypical drama, that dimension. For some, it's Nimanakaya. For some, it's all the same. It is actually all the same, but different people have their own preferences. Yep. Oh, okay.
Another question.
Yeah, sure.
Is awareness the same as the transitional state, or does awareness enable you to go into the transitional state? I don't know. That's why I'm asking.
How many forms of awareness have we been in today? Have you been in awareness today? Mm-hmm. And sometimes are you in awareness with your mind, thinking? And sometimes are you in awareness without your mind? Mm-hmm. And sometimes are you in awareness more locked into external reality? And sometimes in between? That question is an experiential question, I think. For your own self and for my own self, where am I at now? As they say in Louisiana, where are you at? And I think that's how that can be articulated. Am I in awareness? And what is this dimension of awareness? But I'm going to end with one reading about awareness from Dudjom Rinpoche.
Thank you.
Thank you. I love your questions. Finally, although hundreds or thousands of explanations are given, there's only one thing to be understood. Know the one thing that liberates everything. Awareness, your true nature. Dudjom Rinpoche. With that, I thank everybody for coming. I thank Pete for coming. I love him coming. And we'll meet again next week. And then I think you're gonna come back and talk on El Arabin, I think, sometime. That'd be great. A great Sufi master who was in this similar genre, the heart essence genre, but from a Sufism point of view. And what? Oh, that'd be great. We could do that same day. We'd do a Dudjom Rinpoche and Dudjom Lingpa and see because it's the same person going through the same life. Thank you, guys. Check out your computers or whatever that is to see if you want to go to the Karmapa. who also is the same person entering life after life, the same function.
And he'll be live streaming.
Oh, really? Oh, really? When is the? Where did you find that?
Right on his website.
On his website. Great.
Because I went to try to do what you said this morning.
Yeah.
And I Googled llamas.
Yeah.
In Wappinger Falls. Nothing about Wappinger Falls yet, but I got a great video about some real llamas that escaped from the zoo.
Oh, great. Great.
But anyway, he's sold out on Saturday in New York, but there's a Sunday opening if anybody can get to New York City. Oh, really great. On the 12th, April 12th, there's openings for him. Just go right to karmapa.org. Yeah, and then his schedule. He's mostly talking at universities. It's fascinating. He's connecting with with the kids. That is great.